Let's take a look at the percentage of the country who say that we're on the right track. It's actually a very high percentage when you compare it to some historical numbers. What are we talking about? According to Marist, 45% say that we're on the right track. That's the second highest that Marist has measured since 2009. How about NBC News? 44%. That's the highest since 2004. Wow. The bottom line is the percentage of Americans who say we're on the right track is through the roof. And if you were to compare it to when presidents have historically been reelected, of course, Trump is not constitutionally eligible to run for re-election, but I think it sort of puts it in perspective. 42% of the country says the country is on the right track when the incumbent party is re-elected. And also keep in mind, back when Kamala Harris lost and the Democrats were turned out of power, only about 27 to 28% of the country said the country is on the right track. The bottom line is right now, a much higher percentage of the country says we're on the right track.
But I want to talk about what is going on in the United States, talking about politics. The younger generation is becoming more conservative. We saw in the election last year, it was a political earthquake. It was the young people who went from being the most progressive to the most conservative in really a short period of time. Here's this analysis on a New York Times podcast.
But if you look at this chart among white men who were 75 years old, supported Kamala Harris at a significantly higher rate than white men who are 20 years old.
That's exactly right.
That's a real shift.
It is a real shift. This is the thing I am the most shocked by, I think, in the last 4 years, is that young people have gone from being the most progressive generation since the baby boomers, and maybe in some ways more so, to becoming potentially the most conservative.
So Democrats are getting destroyed now among young voters.
That's right.
Josh, what do you put this down to? Are younger people becoming more conservative, or is it just that the left has just gone far too extreme?
Well, I think that there are two things here. One is that young people in America have grown up in the shadow of a lot of failures, unfortunately. They've grown up in the shadow of multiple failed wars overseas, whether it's Iraq or Afghanistan. They've grown up in the shadow of an ever-escalating and skyrocketing national debt. Perhaps more so than anything else, the people who have just turned 18 here, those who are in the 18-25 demographic, they partially came of age during the COVID-19 pandemic. I mean, they came of age at a time when Anthony Fauci and public authorities here were basically telling you to not leave your house for months or years on end there. If, God forbid, you wanted to take your child to the local park, you could get a violation there. How dare you ever consider going out in public if you're not triple masked, and on and on and on there. COVID-19 was one of the most debilitating episodes in all of modern human history, especially here in the United States when it comes to leading to decreased public trust there. So I think part of this just visceral response to lack of trust is being taken out on the Democratic Party, because they are rightly perceived right now in America's two-party system as the party of institutionalism, as the party that controls the institutions here, whether it's academia, whether it's the media, whether it's the public health authorities there. So they're naturally going to the more counter-institutional, counter-establishment party, which at this time is the Republican Party, especially under Donald Trump. I think that's half it there. The other half of it is that Donald Trump as an individual, just as a cultural icon there, is leading a cultural movement. The same way that Barack Obama led a cultural movement back for impressionable teenagers and 20-somethings back in 2008. Back then, the slogan was hope and change. A lot of young people voted for the Obamas. We all remember that poster, the blue and red poster with kind of the faded image of Barack Obama there. Well, MAGA actually, in kind of a weird way, actually is the equivalent of that in this particular decade. Donald Trump is absolutely leading a movement. The red MAGA hat is basically the closest successor to that hope and change poster back from 2008 there. And the same way that Barack Obama was bigger than politics, but was really able to transcend popular culture, so too is Donald Trump bigger than politics, and he is 100% transcending and permeating himself all throughout American popular culture. Look at this past weekend. He attended the NCAA Wrestling Championship. He got a roaring applause. The wrestler, I believe from Oklahoma State, who won the national championship, went over to Donald Trump, gave him a big bear hug. Wherever he goes, whether he was at the Daytona 500, the first NASCAR race of the year, whether he went to the Army-Navy football game, wherever he goes here in the U.S., he is immediately embraced. He is applauded there. The whole Trump dance has become kind of like a cultural icon here in sports, on television. I mean, he's transcended politics, which makes sense because he's been a global figure for the better part of his entire adult life, going back to the New York tabloids in the late 70s, early 80s. So he really has kind of become much, much, much bigger than just president of the United States. He is leading kind of a just broader societal movement. I think that is part of why young people are flocking to him as well.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more. Love seeing you do the Trump dance just then, Josh, as well. But finally, before I let you go, I didn't think we'd be agreeing with Bernie Sanders today, but he's actually making sense. He was asked about Donald Trump on ABC News and admitted that nobody thinks illegal immigration is a good thing.
Is there anything that you think Trump has done right?
Yeah, I mean, I think cracking down on fentanyl, making sure our borders are stronger. Look, nobody thinks that illegal immigration is appropriate.
Wasn't expecting that, but credit is, where credit is due. He's right.
You know, I think back to the 2016 Democratic presidential primary. So that was really three candidates. It was Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, and the former governor of Maryland, Martin O'Malley. So back then, if memory serves, I think it was during this cycle. It was during a presidential primary debate that the topic of open borders came up. And Bernie Sanders dismissed it out of hand. He said, open borders, that's a Koch brothers concept. Because you got to understand, Gabriella, Bernie Sanders came of age at a time when to be on the left was to support a closed border for big labor reasons, for labor union reasons, for the AFL-CIO, for people like that. And Bernie Sanders, I mean, look at the guy. He's been around the block for a long time. This is someone who, at his core, is a socialist. That is what he cares for.
Yes.
He's not necessarily, at his core, a woke neo-Marxist. He's someone who really cares first and foremost about socialist economics there. So, you know, he doesn't support cracking down on illegal immigration for law and order reasons. He doesn't care about it for sovereignty or nationalism reasons or anything like that there. He supports it in theory. I guess in theory, because in practice, I'd have to see what kind of legislation he would actually support, right? But in theory, I guess he's mouthing off rhetorically support for this because these are kind of his old socialist, closed border, you know, hike the wages of the working class talking points going back to the 1960s. I'm not belittling that, by the way. I happen to also agree with trying to spike the wages of the working class there. I support a more restrictionist immigration paradigm as well there. But the goal or the point here is that this is kind of just an out of context moment for Bernie Sanders. It kind of exposes that he is of a fundamentally different generation. he's been replaced in many ways by the young culture warriors, the Ilhan Omars, the AOCs. But frankly, if Democrats actually want to get back to being somewhat relevant on a national level here in the United States, they need to ditch the culture war and get back to their old blue collar economics. Even if I don't always agree with those economics, at least they're talking about the issues that matter there. Bernie Sanders, in a weird way, as crazy as he is kind of a throwback to that.